Labour tax rises are looking more and more inevitable. And let's take you through Labour's whopping giveaway since they took power in July. Of course, we heard yesterday, Chagos Island, 30 billion quid. Public sector pay rises, £53.9 billion over the course of the Parliament. Carbon capture, 22 billion. Ukraine, 15 billion. Overseas climate aid, 11.6 billion. Junior doctor pay rises, 2.5 billion. And they still might go on strike. Train drivers, 675 million. Defence increases 40.2 billion, and the extra borrowing cost of all of that, 14.6 billion. Now that, my friends, takes us to a total so far of over 190 billion pounds of a giveaway, and that is almost 9 times the size of the 22 billion pound black hole. Will there be tax rises incoming to pay for all that? Well, I'm joined now in the studio by the policy analyst at the Taxpayers Alliance, Shimeon Lee. Shimeon, a pleasure to have your company for the second time this week. With that amount of money going out, it feels like public spending is getting out of control. 2 ways to pay for it: borrow or tax. A lot of people are saying tax rises incoming.
Well, I think you're absolutely right that public spending does seem to be out of control. We just saw this today with the massive inflation-busting pay rise that the government is about to give away. And that's something that the country simply cannot afford, as with all these other spending increases. I mean, the Treasury itself already said that it only budgeted for 2.8%. So that's going to mean cuts in other areas in order to make up that sum. But looking at public spending as a whole, that's actually gone up to unprecedented levels. If you look at public spending, what is forecasted to be across this parliament, it's set to rise to around 45% of GDP. Now, that is frankly an unprecedented level that's only usually been reached during times of crisis historically. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, during the great financial crisis. But under this government, it's supposed to be going on at 45% on average in the future.
Now, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister both said there will not be any more tax rises on working people. There's that phrase again in this government. But this week, Shimeon, we've already heard from the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner setting out actually she might go on a £4 billion tax raid for people's savings. So they seem to be on manoeuvres to try and get their claws onto people's stash.
Well, I think it's right to be sceptical of the government's promises on tax. I mean, we all remember during the election, they promised not to raise VAT, not to raise national insurance, not to raise income tax, not to raise corporate tax. But immediately after the election, what did they do? They raised the employer's national insurance. That's a tax on jobs. That's a tax on working people. And that's a tax that's going to prevent a lot of people from getting pay rises in the private sector, just as they're voting these massive increases in pay for people in the public sector.
Now, the government would say if they're in a tight corner and they inherited badly, then they will have to try and make ends meet, and that means making difficult choices. A lot of those choices our viewers might not be happy about, but you have to be prudent. You can't just endlessly borrow or we'll end up whirling down the plug hole. So do they just have to do this? Is that the brutal reality?
Well, I think no government's ever forced to do anything. It's all a political choice, especially with these public sector pay rises. I mean, for most of the past 2 decades, public sector pay has been higher than private sector pay, even though productivity has been lower than in the private sector. And if you look at these pay rises, a lot of them are above the rate of inflation. So what is the justification there for ever increasing pay for the public sector? And you make a very good point about the national debt. The national debt is hitting about £2.6 trillion. The interest, just the interest on the national debt is about £100 billion a year. That's a phenomenal sum. And the government has to take action in order to reduce that instead of borrowing more.
OK, we have to do that. Excellent as ever. Thank you very much there. Shimeon Lee, the policy analyst at the Taxpayers Alliance.